Britain was still covered in soot and silence when these cars first appeared. The war had ended, but the struggle had not. Cities were scarred by bombing. Fuel was rationed. Families counted every penny. Yet across smoky factory floors and rain-soaked streets, the British motor car became something deeply emotional once again. Hope. For ordinary people, owning a car in the 1940s was not about speed or glamour. It was about dignity, freedom, a small reward after years of sacrifice. But some of the cars, trusted by post-war Britain, were painfully slow, even by the standards of their own time. And if forgotten British motoring history fascinates you, subscribe and join us as we step back into an era when even the slowest cars carried the weight of an entire nation. These were Britain's slowest cars of the 1940s, and some of them struggled to outrun bicycles.
Number 10. The Morris 8 Series E. Even before the war had fully faded into memory, the Morris 8 Series E returned with a shape that looked reassuringly traditional. Rounded wings, upright grille, narrow tyres. It was the sort of car that blended quietly into suburban Britain, parked beside terraced houses beneath washing lines, fluttering in the cold wind. Powered by a tiny 918cc side-valve engine, producing barely 23 horsepower, the Morris 8 could eventually reach around 58 miles per hour, eventually being the important word. But buyers were not chasing excitement. They wanted reliability, simplicity, something dependable enough to survive muddy roads, rationing, and endless repair shortages. For many families, this was their first glimpse of normality returning. Inside, it felt modest, but respectable. Thin seats, simple gauges, a faint smell of damp wool coats and petrol lingering in the cabin during winter mornings. The Morris was painfully slow uphill, especially when fully loaded with children and luggage on seaside holidays. Drivers often found themselves overtaken by lorries while the engine groaned in protest. Still, compared to what came next, it almost felt lively.
Number 9. The Hillman Minx Phase 3. The Hillman Minx Phase 3 was marketed as modern and refined, a car for ambitious middle-class households trying to rebuild comfortable lives after years of uncertainty. Its styling looked smooth and optimistic beside older pre-war machines still rattling across Britain's roads. But beneath the polished image sat a modest 1.2-liter engine struggling to produce meaningful pace. The Minx could barely reach 60 miles per hour under ideal conditions, and even then, the engine sounded strained, as though every mile demanded effort. Drivers learned patience very quickly. Yet there was genuine pride attached to ownership. Families posed beside them in black and white holiday photographs. Fathers polished them every Sunday morning while neighbors watched from garden gates. For many people, this was success made visible. But long journeys became exhausting affairs. Weak acceleration turned overtaking into a nerve-wracking gamble on narrow country roads lined with hedges and fog. Winter starts could be stubborn, gearboxes often felt agricultural, and the next car would test British patience even further.
Number 8. The Standard 8. The Standard 8 carried a name that promised solidity, dependability, something reassuringly British during uncertain times. And in fairness, it delivered basic transportation to thousands who otherwise could never have afforded a car at all. But performance was painfully limited. Its small side-valve engine offered around 23 horsepower, and with 4 passengers aboard, the car felt breathless. Hills became slow-motion battles. Drivers frequently dropped into lower gears simply to maintain momentum. Still, there was something touching about the Standard 8. It represented sacrifice rewarded. Families who had survived wartime austerity finally had the ability to visit relatives without relying on crowded trains or unreliable buses. Children stared from tiny rear windows at a changing Britain filled with rebuilding and renewal. The problem was that the car itself often felt exhausted before the journey even properly began. Road noise flooded the cabin. Brakes required determination, and long-distance trips demanded endurance from both machine and driver alike. But one tiny British car somehow managed to feel even slower.
Number 7. The Austin 7. By the late 1940s, the Austin 7 already felt like a survivor from another age. Its origins stretched back to the 1920s, and beside newer designs, it looked almost fragile. Yet Britain still loved it. Cheap to run and astonishingly simple, the 7 became transport for shopkeepers, young couples, and returning servicemen desperate for independence. In cramped cities still scarred by war damage, its tiny proportions made practical sense. But speed was not part of the experience. With barely enough power to keep pace with modern traffic, the Austin 7 demanded commitment from its drivers. Crosswinds unsettled it. Steep inclines slowed it dramatically. Heavy rain leaked through aging seals, while tiny wipers struggled across fogged glass. And yet, people formed emotional attachments to them, because these little cars represented resilience itself. Owners forgave the discomfort, because Britain itself was uncomfortable. The nation was rebuilding, brick by brick. The Austin somehow mirrored that determination. But the next car carried far grander ambitions and far greater disappointment.
Number 6. The Triumph 1800 Roadster. At first glance, the Triumph 1800 Roadster looked magnificent. Long bonnet, sweeping curves, a dramatic grille inspired by pre-war luxury cars. Triumph wanted elegance and prestige during a period when Britain desperately craved beauty again. But beneath the glamorous styling sat a heavy machine, powered by an engine that simply could not cope. The 1.8-liter engine produced around 65 horsepower, which sounded respectable until drivers experienced the car's enormous weight. Acceleration felt sluggish. The Roadster moved with the grace of a tired ocean liner. Owners expected sophistication. Instead, they received a car that struggled to feel effortless. Still, there was undeniable theater in driving one. Crowds stared, children pointed, couples imagined themselves glamorous again after years of ration books and air raid sirens. Yet many owners quietly discovered the fantasy faded during actual journeys. Steering was heavy, fuel consumption disappointed, wet weather exposed questionable build quality. And what arrived next made this look almost modern.
Number 5. The Jowett Bradford. Few vehicles captured post-war Britain more honestly than the Jowett Bradford. This was not a car built for luxury or aspiration. It was built for survival. Farmers used them. Tradesmen relied upon them. Small businesses loaded them with tools, crates, milk bottles, and hope. Its boxy body looked brutally functional, as though elegance had been abandoned entirely in favor of necessity. Powered by a tiny, flat twin engine, the Bradford was astonishingly slow. Top speed hovered around 50 miles per hour, often less when heavily loaded. But people tolerated it because they had little choice. Britain's economy was fragile. Money remained scarce. Practicality mattered more than comfort. The Bradford became part of the nation's recovery itself, crawling through villages and industrial towns, carrying the weight of rebuilding Britain. Still, drivers endured freezing cabins, minimal refinement, and journeys that felt endless. And the next machine pushed slowness into near absurdity.
Number 4. The Bond Minicar. Tiny even by 1940s standards, the Bond minicar looked less like a proper automobile and more like an improvised solution to national hardship, because that is exactly what it was. Britain faced shortages everywhere: fuel, steel, money. The Bond answered those realities with extreme simplicity: lightweight construction, minimal engineering, tiny motorcycle-derived engines. The result was painfully underpowered. Strong winds could unsettle the car alarmingly, while acceleration felt almost non-existent. Drivers planned entire journeys around avoiding steep hills whenever possible. Yet there was optimism hidden within its awkward little shape. For some owners, this represented independence they could finally afford. Newly married couples squeezed into them. Young workers escaped crowded buses for the first time. There was pride in simply owning anything with wheels and an engine. But comfort barely existed. Noise dominated the cabin, weather protection felt optional, and somehow Britain still managed to build something even slower.
Number 3. The Morris Commercial J-Type. Technically a van rather than a family car, the Morris Commercial J-Type became an unforgettable sight on British roads. Bakers, electricians, delivery drivers, and grocers depended upon them every single day. And they were painfully slow. Its modest engine struggled beneath heavy commercial loads, turning even gentle inclines into exhausting climbs. Drivers sat high above the road, listening to engines drone endlessly through narrow streets lined with soot-blackened buildings. But these vans became woven into daily British life. Children heard them arriving with bread deliveries in the morning. Shopkeepers waited for supplies packed into cramped cargo spaces. They symbolized working Britain itself. The hardship of ownership was simply accepted. Cold cabins, heavy controls, endless vibrations. Yet millions of ordinary lives quietly depended upon vehicles like this, continuing to crawl forward every day. But the next car revealed just how desperate Britain's motoring market had truly become.
Number 2. The Allard Clipper. Small, awkward, and desperately underpowered, the Allard Clipper emerged during a period when manufacturers experimented wildly with cheap mobility solutions. Powered by a tiny engine producing little more than motorcycle performance, the Clipper struggled to achieve genuine road confidence. Drivers often felt vulnerable beside larger vehicles roaring past on open roads. And yet, buyers still appeared. Why? Because owning any motor car in the late 1940s still carried emotional weight. It suggested progress, stability, a future finally beginning to improve. The Clipper delivered that dream in its cheapest possible form. But journeys could feel painfully exposed. Noise echoed through thin body panels. Mechanical reliability remained questionable. Long-distance travel became an act of patience and courage. And then came number 1. Number 1. The AC Petite. The AC Petite barely resembled conventional motoring at all. Tiny wheels, minimal bodywork, a small engine struggling to produce meaningful speed. The AC Petite was less about driving pleasure and more about simple survival in an exhausted nation trying desperately to move forward again. Flat out, it could manage roughly 38 miles per hour, sometimes less. On windy roads, drivers gripped thin steering wheels while faster traffic thundered past. Hills became humiliating. Journeys demanded determination rather than enjoyment. And yet the Petite remains strangely moving today, because it represented Britain at that exact moment in history. Tired, damaged, resourceful, determined. These slow little cars were never truly about performance. They were about ordinary people rebuilding ordinary lives after extraordinary hardship. Families carrying groceries through bomb-scarred streets. Couples driving towards small rented homes. Workers chasing stability in a nation still recovering from war. The speed hardly mattered in the end. What mattered was movement, forward movement. And perhaps that is why these forgotten machines still hold such emotional power today. They remind us that Britain's recovery was not built by glamorous sports cars or luxurious limousines. It was built slowly, one struggling engine at a time. If one of these cars stirred a memory for you, perhaps from an old family photograph or a story passed down through generations, share it in the comments below. And if you enjoy exploring the forgotten emotional history of British motoring, consider subscribing for more cinematic journeys into Britain's automotive past. Because next time, we uncover the British cars that promised luxury, but quietly became some of the nation's